Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I'm here today to talk to you about Bill C-398 that sought to reform the access to medication regime here in Canada in order to provide at a lesser cost medication to thousands of people across the world whose lives are threatened by HIV, malaria, and other diseases. Mr. Speaker, I spent a year and a half consulting all the stakeholders involved in this matter. I talked with brand name pharmaceutical companies who had been opposed to previous bills, but who gave their support to this bill going forward in committee. I met a generic pharmaceutical company who had used a CAMR in the past and explained to me why the current system is broken. I also met with representatives from a vast civil society network who are pushing for this bill. Mr. Speaker, my colleague on the other side of the House did not put in this effort.
Days before the vote, that he spoke to the brand names from pharmaceuticals, and he did so only after the same pharmaceuticals had written to us to say that they were ready to see Bill C-398 go to committee. Why, Mr. Speaker? Well, because the people on the other side of this House did not really care about the bill. They had decided from the start that they were going to oppose for partisan reasons. And if it meant doing away with the truth, they did not care. Let me give to you just a few examples. They argued that the bill would weaken the safeguards ensuring that medicines are not diverted. This is simply false. All the safeguards adopted by Parliament when it first created CAMR unanimously in 2004 remain. None of them were changed. They said it would remove measures to ensure the quality of medicines being supplied. False again. There was absolutely no change to the requirement for Health Canada to review all drugs exported. They argued it would violate Canada's obligation under the World Trade Organization's Treaty on Intellectual Property Rights. Again, not true. Experts have testified that C-398 was fully compliant with WTO rules. Then they said it could jeopardize negotiations for a free trade agreement with Europe. Whoops, Mr. Speaker. The EU has similar regulations. À vrai dire, tous ces pseudo-arguments.
In fact, all these supposed arguments were only excuses for the Conservatives to oppose the bill. This is why every time their argument was proven wrong, they fell back on something else. At the end, for lack of being able to put forward any argument that was valid, they started talking about the government's efforts to fight HIV and AIDS in Africa. And that is what I suspect my colleague across the floor is going to do in a few minutes. Mr. Speaker, it's all very well to fight AIDS in Africa, but Mr. Speaker, why can't we also adopt a measure which, at no cost for the Canadian taxpayer, would stretch our aid money to a maximum amount, save lives, and even create jobs in Canada?
The vote, we actually had enough support for the bill to go to committee, including from Conservative MPs. But the government decided that they would not let this happen. They put partisanship before a life-saving measure. They circulated lies about the bill. They pressured their MPs not to vote for what they believe right, and they ended up disappointing thousands of Canadians. Well, now they can wear it. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Industry.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. And of course, Mr. Speaker, had the honourable member been at the committee process when committee did study a bill almost identical to this one, the independent public servants who testified before that committee refuted just about everything that the honourable member just said. But, Mr. Speaker, I am happy to respond to the comments made earlier by the honourable member for Laurier-Sainte-Marie regarding Bill C-398, an act to amend the Patent Act, Drugs for International Humanitarian Purposes. Monsieur le Président, le gouvernement.
Mr. Speaker, the government is an active international party and a partner and a world leader in the fight against HIV, AIDS, tuberculosis, and malaria. The Government of Canada has made major contributions to global mechanisms that have become major instruments in obtaining drugs at a lower price for low-income and intermediate-income countries.
I'd like to remind everyone of one significant example. Canada is a top per capita contributor to the Global Fund to fight AIDS, tuberculosis, and malaria, contributing $540 million for 2011 to 2013. The Global Fund is an international financing mechanism that seeks to disperse funding for programs that reduce the impact of HIV/AIDS, tuberculosis, and malaria in low and middle-income countries. The fund has become one of the most significant mechanisms in the fight against these diseases, supporting 4.2 million people with HIV/AIDS, treating 9.7 million people with tuberculosis, and distributing 310 million nets to prevent the spread of malaria. Other major contributions include the $149.6 million to the Global Drug Facility to Stop TB Partnership, $450 million to the Africa Health Systems Initiative, and $2.85 billion, Mr. Speaker, for maternal, newborn, and child health, providing leadership through the Muskoka Initiative. This government stands by our commitment to increasing access to medicines in the developing world. Our approach has yielded results like the ones I've mentioned. In contrast, Mr. Speaker, the bill would have put us offside our international trade obligations and would not have resulted in greater exports to the developing world. Canada is not a low-cost producer of generic drugs and cannot be expected to compete against low-cost emerging markets. It's estimated that India, for instance, supplies 80% of donor-funded antiretrovirals to developing countries. Furthermore, according to the World Health Organization list, over 98% of essential medicines are generic or are not patented in developing countries. Bill C-398 would have eroded patent protection, reducing Canada's attractiveness for investment in innovative science that develops new medicines without increasing the supply of Canadian drugs to those in need. That's why our government, Mr. Speaker, will continue to lead global initiatives to get much-needed medicines to those in need, and we will continue to do so using the most effective means necessary to actually save lives.
The Honourable Member for Laurier-Saint-Marie. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And really, it would take me 10 minutes to reply to all of that. The first point is really striking.
My colleague said that civil servants have testified against this bill in committee while the bill never went to committee, and I'm wondering if he even took pain of reading the bill, which I doubt. Then he's saying it's outside our trade obligations. Well, the people, the experts who have participated in WTO negotiations to set up the framework which would permit that, said that the bill was completely consistent with WTO obligation. Then we're told that it would infringe patent protection and basically that it would affect brand name pharmaceuticals. Well, the brand name pharmaceuticals wrote to the leaders of all main parties in this chamber to say that they had no objection to see the bill go to committee. So really, they're so isolated and they're trying to find arguments that just don't hold water. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Well, Mr. Speaker, the experts that I'm talking about are the independent public servants who have testified time and time again and have said that this bill does do the things that the honourable member says that it doesn't do. So, Mr. Speaker, Bill C-398 would not have increased the export of Canadian-made generic drugs to the developing world. The bill ignored the fact that countries are accessing generic medicines from other low-cost producers like Brazil or India. The bill, if implemented, would have been inconsistent with Canada's international obligations and would have weakened Canada's intellectual property regime. That's what the independent experts said. Our government will continue to focus on what works, and Mr. Speaker, what has proven to work is the government's comprehensive approach in helping those in the developing world. This includes maintaining Canada's access to medicines regime and providing financial support to global public health initiatives. We will continue to be a leading contributor to funds like the Global Fund, the Africa Health Systems Initiative, and the Global Drug Facility. These initiatives and others like them have achieved significant results. Globally, more than 8 million people living with HIV in low and middle-income countries were receiving HIV antiretroviral therapy at the end of 2011. This represents a 25-fold increase from 2002. Progress has also been made for other diseases. 4 times as many people are receiving treatments for TB than in 2000. Mr. Speaker, we'll not stop there. We will continue to lead by example in the global community to increase the availability of treatment to the world's most vulnerable.
The honourable member.